Hi everyone, welcome back to Brookdale Farm. Today we're just about to go and start doing a bit of spraying, and I just thought I would run you through a couple of important parts of the sprayer and how to calibrate it. So we're towing it with a Series 3 Land Rover. Back here we've got what was originally a Jetstream computer trailing spray unit. So it used to have booms that bolted on here. I've taken them off because I've got the McDougall boom on the back now, which is a lot bigger. These computer spray units were very cunning. In spite of their name, the computer spray, they actually had no electronics on them at all. They used to have, running off a gear on the wheel up to this shaft and onto down the other side there, they had a pump that was driven. It was a ground drive pump off the wheel. So as you went faster, the pressure increased on these. As you slowed down, the pressure decreased. When you stopped, everything stopped spraying for you. It's taken them, the modern sprayers do something pretty much the same with an awful lot of electronics, but this was one of the early systems. They worked really well until you wanted to use some of the more modern powdered chemicals that you need to keep well mixed in the tank. So with the newer chemicals, you're supposed to start your pump, have the water circulating in there as you slowly pour the chemical in. With these ones, they had a tap on them, and you'd put everything in there, you'd turn the tap, you'd drive around the paddock 2 or 3 times to mix everything up, you would turn the tap the other way, and then you would start spraying. But it's just not practical with the powdered chemicals to do that anymore. So I've got a Honda pump mounted on the front here. Also, that old computer spray pump was nowhere near big enough for the McDougall boom that we've got on the back. Now, one critical thing about sprayers is your filters. These are, you can either get a mesh filter or a disc filter for these. This spray unit is set up as so that I can bottom fill it. So that means if I've got a fire unit or something with a pump on, I can put it in there, it filters the water first, it comes down through here, and it fills from the bottom of the tank here. This helps to mix all your chemicals as you are going, as you're filling it, and it works really well. Often I just fill this with a hose from the top. I always like to have more taps than you think you're going to need, because you always end up with a leak somewhere and you want to be able to shut everything off. So tap out the bottom of the tank, comes to another disc filter down here that then goes into the Honda pump. Now from the pump, we do this a little bit wrong on this one, just because of the way that it's set up. We've got a regulator here. When that's with a pressure gauge, you can send all the chemical back to the tank. If you pull this down, everything circulates back to the tank. This is for when you're trying to mix your chemicals up in your tank. When we're spraying, we put that back in the up position. We've got a pressure regulator here, and the pressure is quite important, and I'll talk to you a little bit about the pressure settings in a minute. Now, because of the way this one's set up, we're actually this is still regulating the pressure, because everything that is above a certain pressure gets sent back to the tank, but we're actually taking the feed for the boom straight off the pump. It should be coming off the regulator really, and one of these days I'll get round to fixing that. This is a brilliant device. This is an electric tap that we have a switch in the cab to turn everything on and off. And it's so much easier than what we used to do, which was jump out, turn it on, jump back in the cab and go. Now we can just flick the switch. These aren't that expensive. Well, the cheap ones aren't that expensive on eBay. They go up to $500 or $800. I've had a pretty good run with the cheap ones, actually. So that goes back to our boom back here. The boom is in 4 sections, and we've got our main pipe comes down here, splits in half up in the middle there, and then comes down to a section on either side. We've got more filters back here. I like lots of filters because it means you don't block up your jets and you don't spend so long cleaning out jets. I used to spend probably every time I stopped to fill up with water, I would have 1 or 2 blocked jets before I put all these filters on. Now on the boom here, we have, these are the nozzle bodies here, and these are a non-drip nozzle body. So they've got a little spring and a diaphragm in here that hold a certain amount of pressure in the boom, so that when you turn the pump off, the boom doesn't drain completely and you don't get chemical dripping out of there, emptying the boom out. These are great, but they do take a bit of maintenance, and they're not cheap. These are about $10 each. The cheap ones are about $10 each, and I've had a pretty good run out of the really cheap ones. If you go to the more expensive ones, they're a lot more expensive. Now the jets we are running here are a basic T-jet fan jet. This is one of the jets here. These are 110-degree spray angle. These are the most basic jet you can get. These actually do interestingly wear out and the volumes through them change. Now these are a yellow jet. You can get different coloured jets, and there is a chart that will show you the volume that each jet puts out at a particular pressure, and we'll have a look at that chart in a minute. The 110-degree angle is the spray angle that it comes down at. Now 110 degrees means that if your jet height is 500 millimeters off the ground, this is set just a little bit high at the moment, I've got to drop it down in a minute, you get a 500 millimeter wide spray pattern on the ground. So when you're setting up your boom spray, you want your jets 500 millimeters apart. Now this jet, the spray pattern from this jet comes down and ends in the center of this jet. So each area of the ground gets covered by 2 different jets. This just helps if you've got a jet that's a bit blocked up or something like that. Makes sure everything gets covered properly. Now jets are always getting blocked up. They're a real pain. These just come off with a bayonet fitting on here. And there's a filter in there that you can see, and that's looking a bit mucky. I need to clean that one out. I'll do that in a minute. So you can pull them apart and you can clean them out, but if they're not working properly, the first thing to try is get an old nail brush or toothbrush and just give them a good scrub underneath like that. That will often clear out the dirt that's in them, and make them spray again properly without you having to take all of them off every time you get a blockage. So this is the chart we use for all the information for the nozzles. It's got all the different colors on it. There's about eight or 10 different colored nozzles, and they all give you different volumes of liquid through them. So we're using the yellow nozzles. So after the part number along the top of the chart, it gives you a pressure in bar and a flow rate in litres per minute. Now this is really useful when you're checking your nozzles to make sure they're not worn out. You can hold a measuring cup under the nozzle and collect what comes out of it over a minute, and make sure you've got the right amount. Now the next section across is litres a hectare at kilometres an hour. So it gives you a speed, and then for different, if you read down for different bar at different speeds, it gives you how many litres per minute. So we're using yellow nozzles on 2 bar, so that's the top line of the yellow. At 8 kilometres an hour we get 98 litres a minute. At 10 kilometres an hour we get 78 litres a minute. So we're travelling at 10.5 kilometres an hour, which gives us pretty close to 75 litres a minute. So these charts are really useful when you're setting up your sprayer and working out which nozzles you want to use. Once I've worked out my calibration rates and my speeds and things like that, I write it up here on the windscreen. It just helps if somebody else jumps in the sprayer, they know what speed to do. It also reminds me how fast I should be going. This is almost worn off now, but running at 2 bar, I always aim for 75 litres a hectare. So at 2 bar, we're travelling at 10.5 kilometres an hour. For 75 litres a hectare. At 2.5 bar we can speed up to 11.7 kilometres an hour. Our tank is 1,000 litres, so at 75 litres a hectare that gives us 13.3 hectares of spraying that we can do. I've also got a little GPS speedo down here on the Land Rover, but the main GPS guidance unit also has a speedo on it. It'll take a minute or two for that to actually come on and oh no, there we go. So yeah, that's these are cheap off eBay as well. It's far more accurate than the other speedo, the original speedo in here, which has stopped working now anyway. We've got the controls down here. This one turns the sprayer on and off with that little electronic tap, and this used to turn the compressor on and off for the sprayer. And long ago, when we had a farm scan that told us, that just gave us the acreage, that was the switch in there for that. Now the other thing we have on the front here is this blue barrel. Now this used to be what we used with our foam marker system. So you can get a pink, well, often pink detergent that goes in here. You fill it 3/4 full of water. We've got a compressor mounted up here that blows air into the bottom of the barrel and creates a foam. The compressed air then pushes it out the top of this side of the barrel through this hose here and right down to the end of your boom. And we've got this white pipe here that comes right down to the end of our boom, and it used to have another fitting that sort of hung out and pointed down at the ground. The pink foam would get pushed out from the blue barrel out here and make a blob of pink foam on the ground, and that's a pretty good marking system. If you've got a little bit of stubble cover like this, or as your crop gets a little bit taller, it gets very hard to see the pink blobs. It worked much better when I was using the narrower booms on the Jetstream, because from the Land Rover I really struggled to see back far enough and out far enough to where the blobs are lining up with the end of the boom spray now. So we don't use this anymore, we've gone to GPS, but if you're a small farmer and can't afford a GPS, these work really well. There's no issues with using them at all. If you're just starting out as a small farmer, boom sprays are not hard to build. This is one that I built many years ago when I first started farming. Once again, it's got a computer spray tank on it. It's mounted on half a Land Rover chassis. I just fabricated up the booms. The booms initially were 8 meters wide on each side. Eventually we made them a bit shorter. This was originally mounted on an old Land Rover as well, before it was put on the chassis and made into a tow behind unit. But yeah, look, they're not hard to make. You need a pump, you need a regulator, you need a tank, and you need something to hang your booms on. Don't underestimate how much shock force there is going to be in your booms. They do need to be pretty strong. You can see with these ones, this has had a pretty rough time and has broken a number of times, broken there as well. So we spent a lot of time welding this one back together. But it did me for quite a few years. Often you can also pick up boom sprays pretty cheap. Now today we're just spraying out some glyphosate, but the first thing we're going to put in is some ammonium sulfate granules. Now, this is the same ammonium sulfate that we use as fertilizer as well, but it's a much finer grained crystal, so it dissolves a bit better. We want to add this at 0.8% by weight of this per volume of water, and that's about 8 litres. Now this is where having the pump, being able to start the pump and agitate everything first is really helpful. If I just pour this in, it will just sink to the bottom. It will get sucked into my filter when I start the pump, and it will start clogging everything up for a while until it dissolves properly. So I'm going to start the pump, then we'll gradually pour this in, and then last we put the glyphosate in. Now whenever we've finished spraying a particular crop and we're changing to a different type of crop, particularly lupins are a bit susceptible to some of the pre-emergence and specific chemicals for wheat. We need to give the sprayer a really good washout. So rinse it out well with water, and then just throw some household bleach in. You need about a cup of it in here with a bit of water. Run it through your boom, start your pump, run it through everything, run it through your booms, leave it sitting overnight if you've got time, and this just kills off all this chemical, particularly anything that is in the pipework. Now if you're ever building your own sprayer, go to the expense of getting the proper chemical pipe. Don't just use garden hose. A lot of the rubber hoses and plastic hoses will absorb the chemical, and if you don't use the right stuff, they then release it when you're spraying later on, and it can damage your other crops, your different crops. So just give it a rinse out with bleach, and that gets rid of most of your problems. All right, I'm going to start the pump now and we'll start putting the chemical in. Okay, so I've got the pump running. We can see the water circulating around in the tank, so we're just going to start slowly pouring this in. This stuff is not toxic. Well, don't eat it, but it's not poisonous like some of the other things, but it is quite acidic, so you don't want to get it in your cuts and things like that. Okay, next we're going to add the glyphosate in, and then we're ready to go. Now it's always a good idea to wear a face visor when you're doing this. It's amazing how much will splash up out of that tank even while you're pouring it slowly, and get up on your face. Once we've added that in, we can give the chemical jug a little bit of a rinse out from the water in here. And then if you've got water nearby, it's always a good idea to give your jug a really good rinse to make sure it's ready to go for next time. So we're ready to head off spraying now. So in the Land Rover, into second gear, low range, turn the GPS on, turn the sprayer on, and we're off. Now there's always a couple of seconds lag before the chemical actually starts flowing out the back after you've turned it on. Now we're aiming to just cruise along through the paddock at 10.5 kilometers an hour, keeping an eye on the edge of the end of our booms so that we don't hit anything, and on the GPS to make sure we're heading down the right track. On long straight paddocks like this, You can also line up with some of the furrow marks in the stubble from last year and just stick along with them, and that's also pretty good guidance. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's helped some of you for setting up your sprayer when you need to start doing some spraying. And thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.